The 2-year-old toddler has only a 7-second memory like a fish, yet never forgets her ambition to become a big, bad villain, even causing trouble so severe it alarmed the police uncle. However, due to her young age and being parentless, she was sent to the Welfare Institute to be disciplined and restrained at this moment. At Happiness Welfare Institute, under the old locust tree, the little one puffed out her cheeks, raised her voice, and shouted with great enthusiasm, "My goal is to become a great villain, the spiciest kind." Dean Zhang, upon hearing this, could only shake his head helplessly, walked over, and softly asked, "Why doesn't Tuan ever play with the other kids?" Tuan straightened up with a serious face and declared, "I am a big kid. Big kids don't hang out with little squirts. If you want to play, go ahead. Tuan won't laugh at you." She even patted Dean Zhang's shoulder casually, her aura off the charts. Dean Zhang was left by the little bundle's actions with his mouth twitching uncontrollably. He was just about to administer some serious education when footsteps and discussing voices gradually approached. Everyone subconsciously turned to look and saw a man in his early 40s wearing a suit, accompanied by a fresh-faced young man, slowly walking into the welfare center. Little Tuan's expression instantly turned serious, taking advantage of everyone's momentary confusion. She shot out like a little cannonball while the middle-aged man wasn't paying attention. She bit his calf and, after biting, she tilted her head and grinned smugly, shouting, "Daddy, Tuan is a supervillain. Hurry up and form an alliance with me." The scene froze for a second. Everyone was stunned. Dean Zhang's forehead veins were throbbing, and he hurriedly ran a few steps to pull little Tuanzi, but before his hand could reach out, little Tuanzi was lifted up with one hand by the middle-aged man. Dean Zhang was so anxious he almost knelt down, cautiously explaining, "Mr. Gu, Tuanzi is still young. It's all mischief, absolutely no intention to hurt anyone. She just likes you too much." Got a bit excited. The young assistant Zhao silently pushed his glasses, stunned by the scene before him. Is this his boss's long-lost biological daughter? And Gu Tingchen just kept a straight face, shaking little Tuanzi with one hand, expression serious. "Liking me means biting me." Dean Zhang's mouth was round for a long time, unable to speak, seeing Tuanzi extremely nervous. Little Tuanzi instead puffed out her chest and held her head high, incredibly proud. Gu Tingchen sighed, silently, casually holding little Tuanzi and looking left and right. Finally, after a shake, announced decisively, "I'm taking this kid away." Assistant Zhao took a step, walking towards Dean Zhang, "Let's hurry up with the procedures." Soon after getting in the car, Gu Tingchen placed little Tuanzi by his side, turned slightly with a very serious look. "What's your name?" Little Tuanzi's eyes rolled, answering instantly, "I am the little whirlwind of the great king." Gu Tingchen was petrified on the spot. Tuanzi quickly patted her head, seriously correcting, Wrong, my name is Tuanzi. Dad, I am Tuanzi." Some Gu big CEO's first to his daughter. The impression hit him directly. He turned his head in disdain. But that voice calling daddy was like a key, instantly prying his heart open. Within the disdain, there was even a hint of pride, still fresh. It's truly bizarre to say, meeting Tuan was entirely due to an accident. 3 days ago, Gu Tingchen was intercepted halfway by a fortune teller who insisted he had a long-lost little girl, claiming finding her would bring wealth and good luck. He took it as a joke at the time. But that very night, he started dreaming non-stop. In his dreams, a chubby little dumpling clung to him, hopping around, endlessly chirping, "Daddy, hold me." For 3 days, this looped in his head. Even his VP couldn't escape the echo of "Daddy, hold me," until he finally made time to search for his daughter. The stern-faced CEO glanced at the dazed little kid beside him, almost smiling, thinking to himself, "This little bud better not barge into my dreams as an NPC again tonight." Tuan also noticed her dad's meaningful look. Gaze, a sudden tightness over the body, feeling he is the ultimate villain boss. His own people must all be ruthless characters. Little Tuanzi silently noted. The plan to become a spicy villain must not falter, and even specially learned dad's appearance, lifting his forehead to cast a solemn gaze. Gu Tingchen suddenly let out a low cough. "Authority going online from today on. You are my daughter, Gu Tingchen. The Gu family doesn't raise useless people. To be my daughter, you must have awareness. Got it?" Tuan looked utterly confused, nodding vigorously. Gu Tingchen raised an eyebrow. "Do as I say. Just remember it. No need to understand." Although Tuan didn't understand, She still casually agreed with a sound, but children are naturally born with 100 whys. Once curiosity takes over their brain, they won't rest until they get to the bottom of things. However, Gu Tingjin is not a father with a good temper. His attitude towards his 5 sons can be described as scoundrel level. Wrong can now chat back and forth with two and two in sentence by sentence. The driver sitting in the front row watched with eyes nearly falling out. Who would have thought their own sir and the little one were getting along so harmoniously? He even suspected Gu. Haven't the horses been swapped out again all along, the whole way? The driver's palms were sweating profusely, driving as if going through an extreme challenge, finally enduring until parking. His legs still couldn't help trembling as he got out of the car. The little one, however, herself, climbed down from the car, strolling around as if discovering a new world, brimming with novelty. Gu Tingjin followed closely behind her again, the sight making him unable to hold back a laugh. This walking posture is just like a goose, thinking carefully. This little one is already 2 years old. How come she still walks all wobbly? With a touch of concern, he lowered his head to look at the butler who had come forward, his voice calm as he instructed. Find some time later to arrange a comprehensive physical examination for her. The butler understood and acknowledged, but his gaze held curiosity, unable to resist leaning in to ask in a low voice. Sir, this child. Gu Tingjin didn't even pause his steps, tossing out a sentence, my daughter. The butler was completely stunned, petrified, on the spot for several seconds before snapping back to reality, quickly chasing after him. Yet the astonishment on his face still couldn't be hidden. Soon, the manor was abuzz. Everyone knew that the little girl Mr. Gu brought back from outside was said to be his biological daughter. Upon entering the main building, Gu Tingjin instructed people to take good care of the little one. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and entered the study. As everyone knew, Gu Tingjin had always been an iceberg of a CEO. Coupled with a fiery temper, no one wanted to provoke him, the butler, the maids. None of the staff dared to come his punching bag now that the child's decisive and stern father had left. The young maids in the room finally let out a sigh of relief, their courage gradually growing. The moment that little girl entered, Cece was completely overwhelmed by her cuteness. With the master gone, Cece quickly took out a few chocolates, smiling as she approached, and while the little one wasn't paying attention, reached out a hand to touch her face, the soft, little cheek immediately trembling up and down. The little one, dazed, cupped her own cheeks with both small hands, dragging out her milky voice. Her face no longer felt like her own. The maids nearly laughed themselves. Silly, the kid the boss brought back was just too hilarious. Adorable enough to kill them on the spot. Cece was so delighted. She kept rubbing the little one's head. The little one raised her face, her small expression serious. She solemnly pushed that hand away, declaring with full-on childish authority, woman, you can't pat my head anymore. From now on, I'm going to be the super invincible megavillain. A megavillain's head cannot be patted casually. After saying that, she even lifted her chin, wearing a look of, come on, praise me for my villainous aura being maxed out smug expression. Cece was stunned for a moment, as if genuinely overwhelmed by Tuanzi's presence. Yet 20 minutes later, the little flower who just had a full score of aura now hung her head dejectedly. When Gu Tingjin came downstairs, he unexpectedly came across the maids surrounding Tuanzi, ruffling the kid's hair into a bird's nest. The little girl, Tuan, was completely bewildered, her mouth puckered, and she threw herself into her dad's arms, wailing loudly. I don't want to be a villain anymore. Gu Tingjin narrowed his eyes, almost unable to resist grabbing his daughter to scold her, but seeing the kid's pitiful crying and messy little appearance, he forcibly suppressed his anger and shot a fierce glare at the maids beside them. The young maids were so frightened they shuddered, looking down at the ground and up at the sky, not daring to make eye contact. After a long while, he awkwardly shifted his gaze away, stiffly holding the little ball of a child, took a tissue from the coffee table and handed it over. The little one was still sniffling with tear-streaked cheeks, so Gu Tingjin simply tossed the tissue onto her head. Listless yet stern in tone, wipe it clean yourself. Don't cry at the drop of a hat from now on if you want to be my Gu Tingjin's daughter. Can't you be a bit more strong-willed? The little ball was staring at him expectantly, and upon hearing this, suddenly started wailing even louder this time. Gu Tingjin was completely at a loss. His tactic had no effect on his daughter at all. His 5 sons were each top tier, Genius with a bunch of eccentricities since childhood, a weird and strange personality. When someone's son goes astray, how anxious the parents must be. Gu Tingjin just had to add fuel to the fire, practically wishing the whole family held the villain's script. In the Gu family, not a single. He's a normal person, practically everyone's a villain. Saying that this little girl wasn't even falling for his usual tricks, Gu Tingjin's face turned dark and hard as iron. Heat glared. Directly removed the tissue from the little bun's head and clumsily wiped her cheek. Seeing the kids still crying non-stop, CEO Gu immediately realized, quickly grabbed a strawberry and stuffed it into the little girl's mouth. As soon as the sweetness emerged, the bun immediately stopped crying, hugging the strawberry and happily gnawing away. Gu Tingjin simply handed over to more strawberries. The little bun ate them with her eyes curved into happy crescents, sweet enough to fly. Only then did he relax, quietly making a mental note. This little girl is like his own 5 at home. The rebellious son is completely not of one style. You have to coax him along. Otherwise he will only whimper and cry. However, thinking of how he had feared nothing in half a lifetime and was now learning to yield to others for the first time, Gu Tingjin felt truly helpless at heart. The end. But seeing the little one eating so heartily, he quietly took away the plate of strawberries in front of him. The little rascal looked up in confusion, a pair of big eyes sparkling with question marks as if accusing. Daddy, you took my strawberries. What for? Gazing at the little one's adorably silly posture, the conviction in Gu Tingjin's heart grew even stronger. His gaze turned cold and he spoke word by word. The Gu family doesn't raise useless people. The little one pitifully widened her round, bright eyes, nodding repeatedly, mimicking him quite seriously. Shoulders shaking. That's right, no raising useless people. Seeing her like this, Gu Tingjin's expression finally softened a bit, the corner of his lips slightly. One pick. Never thought this little thing really knows its own weight. But what can you do? How can you prove you're not a waste? His eyes darkened a shade, his tone carrying a hint of provocation. The little brat learned quite convincingly. Immediately blurted out in a milky, childish voice, yeah, how do you prove you're not a little waste? The moment the words fell, she looked around, darting her eyes about, and realized she was the only little dumpling in the room. She lowered her head and patted her own little tummy, suddenly wearing an expression of dawning realization. So the little waist daddy was talking about was silly little Tuan. Gu Tingjin, facing this little one with such a sudden, sharp turn in logic, felt like his head was about to explode. For the first time in his life, he was so angry he was left speechless. Little Tuan, full of confidence, shuffled down from the sofa, humming and mumbling, walked up to him with a fake duck's waddle, then turned around and stuck out her little bottom, just as, while everyone else was bewildered, the air suddenly went *POOT*, and the entire room fell silent in an instant. The little girl that Sir had brought back from outside had actually just publicly passed gas at her own father. The whole room was stunned. The little one. The child straightened his back, tilted his head high, looking like he was waiting for daddy to praise him quickly, eagerly anticipating his father's praise, completely unaware that Gu Tingjin's facial expression was already uncontrollable. The towering fury simply wished to blow the roof off. Sure enough, the next second the little rascal was directly picked up by him, grabbed by the small collar and held suspended in midair. Gu Tingjin was truly about to explode with anger. This little guy not only showed no fear but dared to fart in front of everyone. The veins on his forehead were throbbing, gripping the back of the child's collar and not letting go, originally intending to give the little girl a few swats, but remembering the explosive sound earlier, he paused slightly, finally gritting his teeth and giving a squeeze. The little one's cheeks puffed out, his tone so fierce it could wring out water. You've got quite the gall, daring to fart at your old man. Not receiving the praise he expected, the little bundle's mouth pursed into a pout, utterly aggrieved, his two small hands covering his mouth, tears welling up in his eyes, that pitiful look indescribably heart-wrenching. Gu Tingjin's heart softened, his earlier anger instantly dissipating by more than half. At this moment, the little bundle cried, sobbing and accusing between tears, Daddy's so mean. Still being fierce with me, boo-hoo. I'm really so pitiful. Daddy is a super big bad guy, boo-hoo. My poopy. Before, when I tooted, Daddy would always say, it smelled sweet, just like Mommy said. Men are all super big scumbags. Gu Tingjin's head buzzed with noise, unable to figure out from which secret manual the little one learned this, whoever said farts smelled sweet, his mind was nearly in a daze. Wasn't this just madness? And so, one man and one child fell into a war of words over the great conundrum of whether a fart smells sweet. Meanwhile, outside the estate, Gu Qingyu, who had just returned home from school, slowly slipped out of the car and ambled toward the main building when suddenly, from behind him, came several whispers. Hey, have you all heard? Big news just broke. The master actually brought a woman back. Gossip is human instinct. In less than an hour, the news had spread to every corner of the Gu household, and the rumors grew wilder and wilder. Several maids gathered together, getting more and more excited as they spoke. Completely unaware that Gu Qingyu was quietly approaching from behind, he narrowed his eyes, lifting his head to charge. A few people chuckled, their tone teasing. What woman? Tell us so we can have a laugh. The little maids trembled and hurriedly clamped their mouths shut, the scene instantly falling silent. Everyone knew that none of the Gu family's 5 sons were easy to deal with. To provoke them was just asking for trouble, seeing them look as if facing a great enemy. Gu Qingyu furrowed his brows slightly, sighed, and decided not to bother with them, walking straight past them toward the main building. Just as he reached the main entrance, Gu Qingyu passed by the butler and casually tossed out a sentence. Fire every single one of them in the garden. Having said that, he didn't even look back as he stepped through the door. His mind only focused on quickly seeing what kind of woman his widowed father had brought back this time. But the moment he entered, a roar exploded in his face. Yes, yes, you're amazing, even your farts smell like roses. Gu Qingyu was instantly filled with question marks. What kind of stimulus had his widowed father suffered today? Acting all weird and muttering, with a hint of stirring up trouble for fun, he narrowed his eyes, quickened his pace, and with a sit-along glance, he spotted a little chubby kid standing by the coffee table. His widowed father was using a tissue to wipe the little one's tears, his expression utterly tragic. Gu Qingyu raised an eyebrow slightly, widened his phoenix eyes, and quickly strode over, opening his mouth with a sarcastic tone. TSK, old Gu. You actually know how to comfort a child? You've kept that trick well hidden. Gu Tingchen turned at the sound, and the appearance of the little one before him was fully revealed. Entirely round and plump, yet with oddly delicate features. Even Gu Qingyu was stunned for less than a second. With just that one glance, he casually grabbed the little one's stray hair, then lifted the other's cheek and played with it for a while. Suddenly unable to hold back a grin. Hey, kid, where's your neck, old Gu? Where did you pick this one up from? Chubby little one, how come you still have no neck? Gu Tingchen coldly glanced at his own daughter's neck, then pursed his lips and stared for a while at this troublesome son before he could even react. Over there, the little brat, who had just been appeased, suddenly burst into wails. With a loud cry, she started crying even harder. Gu Tingchen was so angry that his temples were throbbing. He simply stuffed the little one into Gu Qingyu's arms, his face dark and stormy. Hurry up and calm her down. I spent half an hour soothing her just to get her somewhat settled, and you just... That entire sentence is now useless. If I can't coax him and make it better, you'll regret it. You ungrateful son. As soon as the words fell, Gu Tingchen went upstairs, not even pausing. Gu Qingyu blinked, looking at the little crybaby bundle in his arms, his expression already tinged with a bit of impatience. He directly ordered the little brat, stop crying. The little bundle paid no mind at all, throwing an even bigger fit. Gu Qingyu took a deep breath on the spot, his eyes instantly turning cold, threatening as he spoke. 3 seconds, cry again, and believe it or not, I'll catch the rabbit you brought and roast it to eat. The little bundle froze, immediately holding it in, looking up at him with teary eyes, his gaze filled with grievance and terror. Seeing this, the corners of Gu Qingyu's mouth lifted slightly, secretly scheming in his heart. The Gu family didn't raise rabbits, so who else could have brought the rabbit that suddenly appeared now? Just as he reached out and was about to say something, unexpectedly, the next second, the little kid started crying even harder. 10 minutes later, Gu Qingyu sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the sofa, picking up fruit for the little kid across from him. He casually murmured, little Tuan Tuan is the sweetest, sweet-smelling all over. Her hands are sweet, her feet are sweet, even her farts are sweet. Little Tuan took a bite of mango and happily shook her little head. Seeing her delighted expression, Gu Qingyu couldn't resist taking out his phone, snapping a photo of himself and Tuan Tuan, and then sent it to his widowed dad. Curiously, he leaned forward and asked, Tuan Tuan, how old are you this year? Tuan Tuan giggled and held up 3 fingers, excitedly saying, "I'm 2 years old this year." Gu Qingyu glanced at those 3 chubby little fingers and inwardly smiled, secretly pressing the 3rd finger back down. Tuan, however, didn't notice at all, and after a while, it popped back up. Again, looking at the silly little kid, Gu Qingyu couldn't help but find her adorable. But Tuan thought her brother was playing with her in just 10 short minutes. Gu Qingyu's image in her heart had already transformed into a gentle big brother. Little Tuan thought to herself, "Whoever feeds me is my mother," and happily threw herself into Gu Qingyu's arms, dancing and rubbing herself against him. Gu Qingyu had never held such a soft little thing before, and instantly his mind went blank, his face slightly flushed. He clumsily pushed the little kid away as if encountering an enemy. Stammering, he said, "Who told you to pounce on me?" In an instant, the teenager, with a cold face and clenching his teeth, placed the little one back on the sofa, then turned and fled upstairs as if running for his life. The little bundle stared blankly, watching Gu Qingyu's retreating figure, his face full of confusion. Why did Jeej run away? Does Jeej not like Tuan? He saw the backpack Gu Qingyu had thrown on the sofa, and suddenly had a clever idea. Grabbing the backpack, he headed upstairs. Running up to the 2nd floor, Tuan gently knocked on Gu Qingyu's bedroom door. Hearing the knock, Gu Qingyu inside took a few deep breaths, trying to calm his emotions, and raised his voice slightly to say, "Come in." But after a breath, knocking sounded from outside the door again. Gu Qingyu frowned and shouted sharply, "Get in here." The little rascal outside the door, putting on a serious face, called out in a milky voice, "You come out." After saying this, he seemed to think of something, straightened his back, lowered his voice, and repeated, "Get out here." As soon as the words fell, the door snapped open with a bang. Gu Qingyu's face was cold, full of displeasure. "Little brat, don't think I won't hit you. You'd better be sensible, Diane, or else." Before she could finish her words, Tuan raised both hands holding the backpack and said in a tone she thought was fierce, "Do your homework. Brother is about to take the college entrance exam. Why aren't you studying? If you don't get into university, you'll starve to death. I won't support you." After saying that, she proudly lifted her head. Gu Qingyu was stunned. His backpack was completely empty, so where would homework come from? He froze for a moment, then casually picked up the backpack, tossed out a sentence, "No need for your concern," and then slammed the door shut. By around 5 o'clock, dinner time, Tuan and Gu Tingchen were already seated at the dining table, waiting when Gu Qingyu finally came down from the 2nd floor. Quickly walking to the dining table, "Sit down, pick up your chopsticks, and get ready to eat." Gu Tingchen looked up at him warily, his voice neither hurried nor slow. "What were you doing up there? From now on, if you're late, don't bother eating." Gu Qingyu scratched his head. Didn't we just learn?" Gu Tingchen looked at his silly son with half belief and half doubt, fully aware of his usual antics. Meanwhile, Tuan, seeing his older brother arrive, deliberately crossed his little arms and pouted, pretending to be deep in thought, speaking the most domineering words he had ever heard. "The pots and pans are rolling out. Men, let's feast. The round little one is almost starving to death." Gu Tingchen was immediately stunned, thinking he had only handed the child to Gu Qingyu for less than an hour, and this little guy had actually learned to swear. Gu Tingchen looked at Gu Qingyu with a darkened face. "I told you to coax him. Don't let him cry. You're teaching him to swear." Gu Qingyu slapped his forehead in frustration, wishing he could slap himself. He had just said get in here, and this girl learned it so quickly. The father and son, the two stared at each other, the atmosphere tense, with only the little kid chiming in from time to time. "So yummy." Gu Qingyu swallowed, clenched his fist, pressed it against his lips, coughed lightly, and spoke awkwardly. It slipped out, "I just said get lost." Who knew this little kid would learn so fast? As soon as the words fell, the gluttonous little ball beside him stuffed a soup dumpling into his mouth, smiled until his eyes curved into crescents, opened his mouth and shouted, "Get lost." Seeing his little mouth about to blurt out something else, Gu Qingyu reacted quickly, covering his mouth, and met Gu Tingchen's murderous gaze, gnashing his teeth while pinching Tuan's cheeks, forcing a smile. "The upper beam is crooked. The lower beam is askew." Indeed, Tuan shook his little head, clapped his hands, and repeated, "The lower beam is askew." Gu Qingyu and Gu Tingchen exchanged a glance, both speechless. Gu Tingchen turning away, she quietly sighed and immediately established an ironclad rule: no one in the Gu family was allowed to swear in front of Tuan Tuan, especially you, Gu Qingyu. Gu Qingyu shrugged and replied lazily, "All right, got it, after dinner." Gu Qingyu, with something having gotten into him, suddenly dashed into the room without saying a word. Gu Tingchen then went straight to the study. The next morning at the breakfast table, President Gu, with great seriousness, handed Tuan Tuan a paper filled with the white paper with words, "Take a look, which one do you like?" It turns out that adopting Tuan Tuan required household registration, but the investigation only knew that he called himself Tuan Tuan and his formal name was completely unknown. So President Gu was busy early in the morning, picking out a bunch of names. Considering Tuan Tuan's young age and limited literacy, he patiently read 1, evaluated 1, Gu are you? Like it, Tuan pouts, Gu cat. Gu Tingchen lowers his head and crosses out the name. What about Gu Anren? Tuan stuffs a steamed bun into her mouth, her eyes light up. Gu Mimi, Gu Tingchen's brow twitches, crossing out another one. Likes for duplicated words. That Gu Xiao, Tuan eats happily, shaking his head. Gu the big cat. After fussing for a long time, President Gu discovers he simply doesn't like the name he picked himself. So he lets him suggest names to choose from. Hearing this, Tuan smugly raising his chin, he spat out a string of bizarre names: Gu Kitten, Gu Flower Cat, Gu Brain Axe, Gu Whirlwind. Gu Tingchen's eyelid twitched, thinking to himself that if this little rascal kept it up, he was bound to come up with something even more outlandish. He decisively made the decision and decided on the name Gu Xiao. Tuan wasn't pleased, pouted and protested. No. Then how about Gu Whirlwind? Gu Tingchen sneered. You can call him that if you want. Aren't you afraid people will laugh? I couldn't care less. That reminded Tuan. He is determined to be a great villain. The little brat tossed his head, put on a stern face, and solemnly announced, I've made up my mind. My name is Gu Aocean. Dead silence fell over the room. Gu Tingchen turned his face away, too lazy to deal with this cringy teen. Little brat finally wrote down Gu Tuan on the household register. Still called Tuan as a nickname. Tuan, who got a new name, was unhappy though. After finishing the meal, huddled on the sofa, watching Pleasant Goat and Big Wolf sulking alone. Yet Gu Ting, when Chen came downstairs, the little round one was already nowhere to be seen. He frowned and looked around. Where is Gu Tuan? The butler replied. Sir, Miss Tuan just went out with the Rabbit King to play guerrilla warfare. The great CEO Gu fell silent, his heart. Why can't this girl be a bit more quiet, running around playing guerrilla warfare? The housekeeper originally wanted to send a few maids to follow her. As it turned out, she thought the maid was too tall, complained that she would give away their position, and absolutely refused to let her follow. No other choice, had to let her play by herself. After all, there's not much danger at the Gu family manor. But the butler's expression suddenly changed. Not good. Alpha was in the backyard. Everyone was startled, turning their gaze in unison towards Gu Tingchen. As expected, President Gu's face darkened. Alpha was an adult silver wolf raised by the Gu family's second young master, Gu Yongshu. It had a ferocious temperament, and apart from Gu Yongshu, none dared approach. Although it understood human nature, it usually paid no mind to others. But after all, it was a wolf, and a free-range one at that. Gu Yongshu had specifically warned that captive-bred wolves, no matter how fierce, would never be like dogs. Gu Tingchen's face remained calm, but his heart, everything was in chaos. The butler hurriedly ordered the servants to look for Tuan, while he himself rushed straight to the backyard. Alpha had never seen Tuan before and naturally had no idea she was a member of the Gu family. Gu Tingchen's face was darkening, and he didn't dare let his thoughts go any further. The footsteps changed from a brisk walk to a full-on sprint. At the same time, in the backyard, Little Dumpling was seriously holding his toy gun, quietly hiding behind the grass. His eyes rapidly scanned the surroundings, his movements betraying an air of carefully and cautiously. Then he clumsily rolled over on the ground, earnestly shouting, Your Majesty, it's safe." Tuan held his breath, crouched down, raised his gun, and slowly backed away, only to end up not moving at all again. He still didn't budge. He pouted his mouth, clearly unhappy, leaned his butt against the obstacle behind him and pushed back forcefully. Unfortunately, he lost his balance and, with a thud, toppled heavily to the ground. Little Dumpling was so shocked that he stared, dumbfounded, stupid, with a serious expression. She reached out and tugged at the big gray wolf Alpha's whiskers in front of her, then clicked her tongue, her eyes suddenly narrowing. Wah wah wah, great king, great king. The bad dog's whiskers are just too long, Alpha. Fat let out a sigh, his deep, dark blue eyes fixed firmly on Tuan before him. A flicker of amusement flashed in their depths, then he slowly and leisurely sharpened his claws on the soil. Tuan squinted, sternly waved his hand, his chin lifted proudly, arrogantly lifting its head high. Big dog, give me a chance, be my big dog. And only the kind that is ridden by me and the king, then I'll let you be a big dog. No, I'll give you a way out. 3 seconds later, before his eyes, the silver wolf Alpha, who stood half a head taller than him, let out a sudden, earth-shattering roar, shaking heaven and earth, rushing through every corner of the estate. Gu Tingjin was on his way when he heard this roar and could only quicken his pace, thinking to himself, what's the use of such a huge estate in the end, if it can still be scared into such a state? When he rushed to the backyard, the sight before him made him freeze. For a moment the little one was actually riding on Alpha's back, and on top of the silver wolf's head squatted a chubby rabbit, waving its little paws and shouting, "Charge, kill, little demon Fafa, charge! Go, go!" Alpha responded twice, carrying the little one as it dashed around the backyard. Gu Tingjin, who had been anxious to the point of nearly exploding, watched the scene and finally relaxed his nerves a little. But then he saw that Alpha was actually willingly being ridden. He was curious in his heart. This newly arrived silver wolf, which had nearly bitten a servant before, refused to eat every day, and was wildly irritable. How had it suddenly turned into a well-behaved baby that anyone could ride? President Gu was completely clueless at the moment. Mind, should we praise our round one's cleverness, or has Alpha changed genders? Just then, the butler and maid slowly sauntered over, and seeing the scene, their legs turned to jelly with fright in their eyes. If Alpha, this fierce wolf, truly to change behavior, isn't that about to start eating the little rice ball, having fun? Shook its head, saw Daddy and the butler coming, patted the silver wolf's head. Fafa, I'm going to find Dada now. Dada is here, ow. Fawn turned his head at the sound and walked in the direction the little girl pointed. When he reached Gu Tingjin, the little bundle on his back was suddenly grabbed by Gu Tingjin, who lifted him by the back of his collar, puffing up so much he couldn't possibly puff up anymore. The kid instantly turned into a tiny quail. Tuan pouted, babbling in a milky voice, "Daddy." Gu Tingjin glanced gloomily at Alpha and the fat rabbit on his head, clenching his teeth. He gently shook the little one. "Let's head back. Better get you in order." Without another word and without even looking back, he instructed the butler to lock Alpha in a cage. Returning to the main building, Gu Tuan was taken directly to the second floor study. Life that followed was extremely monotonous, lying on at the small table, listening with a bored expression as his cheat dad mechanically explained various dangerous knowledge. After an hour, Gu Tingjin felt his voice was nearly hoarse and couldn't help but rub his throat. A young kid with a complicated expression and a chubby rabbit squatting steadily beside. "Society is dangerous. Did you understand what I said?" Tuan shook his head, suddenly stood up, his chubby little face written all over with defiance and stubborn. "I am a super invincible big bad guy, Daddy. You don't need to worry. No one dares to bully Tuan. If anyone bullies me, I will." Little milk bun paused, with eyes one big and one small, grinning crookedly and quoting, "Just learned this classic villain line, I will eradicate them completely, and when the weather turns cold, they go bankrupt." The study suddenly fell eerily quiet. The usually stern CEO Gu was so startled that the pen in his hand clattered onto the desk, leaving him staring blankly. Watching the daughter, this child was born with a rebellious bone. Opening her mouth, she spouts arrogant and ruthless words, even more fierce than him. In his mind, he thought of those 5 sons again, each more rebellious than the last, each crazier than the other. Is there not a single normal person in this fucking Gu family? Gu Tingjin rubbed his temples, his head throbbing as if pierced by needles. Beside him, the little rascal Tuan stood with hands on hips, glaring fiercely at him as if ready to climb onto the table and start a fight. He gritted his teeth in secret, thinking this child absolutely cannot be raised to be useless. She must be properly pulled back on track, must not let her be led astray. President Gu's inner worries surged up like a tide in the study. Father and daughter stared wide-eyed at each other. An invisible scent of gunpowder permeated the air. Just then, the study door was lightly knocked. Gu Tingjin uttered a single word in a low voice, "Come in." The door swung open accordingly. Assistant Zhao stepped inside, glancing beside the table. Little Tuan with hands on hips, the way he puffed out his chest made him the living image of the boss. He calmly shifted his gaze away. After just a few days apart, this little baby's aura faintly carried the imposing presence of Director Gu. Breath, he took a step forward, pulled a document folder from his briefcase, and respectfully presented it. Sir, here is the paternity test result. Gu Tingjin slightly nodded, his expression unchanging, took the document and leisurely turned to the last page. On it blared the words, through appraisal, confirmed as father-daughter relationship. Similarity 99.99%. Not a ripple of emotion showed in the depths of his eyes, as if he had long anticipated this outcome. Yet the very next second, he sighed. Chi leaned back against the chair, casting a sit-along glance at Tuan beside him. That little rascal was puffing out his chest proudly. Gu Tingjin raised his hand to press against his forehead, then began rubbing his temples. His worries deepening, Assistant Zhao stood there dumbfounded. Still on the spot, his mind was a bit muddled. What kind of reaction was this? He had originally thought his boss would either burst into tears while holding the child excitedly upon seeing the results, or discover it wasn't his own, and then curl his lips domineeringly to say, even if it's not mine, who can stop me, Gu Tingjin, from getting what I want for this? He had even specially prepared a gift, a limited edition copy of Less Than the Heart Sutra for dads raising kids greater than, planning to butter up the boss. But now, with this expression, what does this mean, Zhao Ti? Assistant Zhao hesitated, his hand reaching into the briefcase only to withdraw again. Pondering whether to give the book or not, Gu Tingjin raised an eyebrow and asked lightly, is there something else? Assistant Zhao gritted his teeth, steeled himself, and pulled out the book wrapped in its cover titled You. The Baby Heart Sutra. All smiles piled up. Boss, this is a gift I specially prepared for you. He began promoting it with great enthusiasm. You're busy with work, surely haven't had much contact with little babies. This book is the secret guide for dads. Global debut. With it, you'll never have to worry about how to get along with your kid. Gu Tingjin narrowed his eyes, staring at the book, not saying a word. Zhao's assistant grew uneasy, palm sweating. After a long while, Gu Tingjin raised his hand and took the book, absent-mindedly flipping through a few pages. Had to admit, he really needed this thing right now. He turned his gaze, feeling a bit more approval for this young special assistant. But as he flipped through the pages, his expression suddenly became peculiar. Special Assistant Zhao thought the boss was captivated by the book's content, grew bolder, and perked up, leaning in closer. Just about to explain a couple of sentences, the next second, the book was slapped open on the redwood table. Gu Tingjin lifted his eyes, his tone calm yet tinged with teasing. How come there are notes? Assistant Zhao instantly froze, swallowing a mouthful of saliva. His mind, this is driving me crazy. This book is packaged so beautifully. Why is it secondhand? He awkwardly forced out a smile, bluffing through. Boss, it's like this. I was afraid you'd be busy with work, so I specifically had someone extract the essential content for you. Thoughtful, right? Gu Tingjin waved his hand, a slight smile curling at the corner of his mouth. This month's salary is doubled. You're dismissed. Noted. Assistant Zhao's eyes lit up, grinning from ear to ear, and he nodded eagerly. Thank you, boss. I'll be going first. Goodbye, boss. With that, he dashed off like a wisp of smoke, leaving the father and daughter to continue their silence in the study. Silently gazes, Gu Tingjin lowers his head, his gaze falling on the page he just opened. It reads, spend more time taking the child out to play. As the days pass, she will let her guard down around you. He seems lost in thought, feeling these words hold some what logic. Looking up at Tuan, he softly suggested, Tuan, Daddy will take you to buy clothes. How about it? Tuan scornfully pouted, waving a small hand. No way. Tuan, am not going. I still have to play with the great king. The world. Gu Tingjin's mouth twitched. Who in their right mind fights for the world by aiming for the wolf's head? He took a deep breath, forcing out a smile. How about we go buy Superman clothes? Tuan's eyes lit up, and he suddenly bounced up. Great. After saying that, he dashed out the door like a gust of wind, shouting while running, Tuan is going to become the spicy devil king. 20 minutes later, the little one was forced into a pink dress, her little face tense and stiff, her eyes full of the message, I'm not happy. Sweet. Gu Tingjin glanced at his daughter's new look, the corners of his lips lifted slightly, clearly in a delighted mood. Sure enough, a change of clothes made the whole person seem more well-behaved. He stroked his chin, but a trace of doubt flickered in his eyes. Something always feels a bit off. He stepped forward, his deep voice carrying a hint of teasing, and said softly to the stiff-faced little one, Gu Tuan, give me a smile, but Tuan's little mouth puckered, and he started wailing at the top of his lungs. He cried out, his wails as tender as a little kitten's mew. Several sales assistants were startled, quickly crouching down to gently coax her. Gu Tingchen's eyelid twitched. He hadn't expected this little brat not only to not smile but to start wailing outright. He had just leaned down, longing to wipe her little face. He discovered that the little one's face was clean, with no tears at all. She was just crying without tears there. Gu Tingchen rubbed his temples and commanded sternly, stop crying. Tuan sniffled. She stopped crying and tilted her head, looking curiously at her silly dad. Seeing her about to start howling again, Gu Tingchen was quick as lightning. He swiftly covered her small mouth with his hand, frowning as he said, if you're going to cry, then cry, why howl? Tuan disdainfully clicked her tongue. Hands on hips, the little one retorted in a milky voice, Daddy just doesn't get it. My wolfy cry is super powerful. Gu Tingchen was speechless. Wolf howl, so this little rascal actually thinks he sounds cool. It suddenly dawned on him that the little one learns things frighteningly fast. Her mind works quicker than anyone else's. We can't let her run wild anymore. At the very least, we have to transform her appearance into a soft, cute little dumpling. He tightened his face, unusually patient in negotiating. Liang, Tuan, as long as you stop wearing those strange clothes from now on, Daddy will grant you a wish. Tuan didn't even think about it, her childish voice drawn out very long. I don't want to. Tornado Tuan is going to be the big ruler of the world. Demon King, without wearing battle attire, you are not handsome at all. Gu Tingchen had no choice but to pick her up and stand in front of the mirror, pointing at the soft and squishy little figure in the mirror. He tried to fool her, saying, your idea is too outdated. Nowadays, that bulky style of yours is no longer in fashion. The Demon King, there's a trend of this cute little Demon King. If you don't believe me, just look. Those aunties are all scared stiff by you. Like this, Tuan pouted and looked back doubtfully, only to see several sales assistants covering their mouths. The corners of her eyes curved into smiles, with a slight lift of her little chin. She looked so proud that her nostrils seemed to point skyward. Turns out I'm so amazing that I made the aunties' eyes crinkle with fright. The sales assistants were nearly overwhelmed by this little cutie, hearts melting. So beautiful that it's unbearable. Tuan thought about it more and more, her little head shaking as she stared at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes sparkling suddenly as if an idea had dawned on her. She exclaimed in a baby voice, so to rule the world, I must first capturing the aunties' hearts. She gazes at her soft and adorable appearance in the mirror. Her greedy for attention little face flushes red, and she shyly snuggles into Daddy's arms, giggling, I'm so adorable, her. Tuan is just a little cutie. Gu Tingchen looked at the little girl who had conquered herself, shook his head, helplessly. Yet the corners of his mouth couldn't help but turn upwards. This little one is quite good at healing herself. With a grand wave of his hand, he generously declared he'd take everything to be delivered to the Gu family manor yard recently because he confirmed his parental relationship with Tuan. He has been especially attentive to her education. At the same time, her relationship with Gu Qingyu is also slowly warming up. However, Tuan has keenly noticed that fifth brother. Beneath that hip-hop exterior, there seems to lie a yearning heart. She just can't figure out what he yearns for. That day, Gu Tingchen didn't come home due to company affairs, and the night owl Tuan, accompanied by Cici, held a water cup and watched Pleasant Goat and Big Wolf, pointing at the gray wolf being beaten and sent flying again on the TV. She asked Sister Cici in a baby voice, why hasn't my daddy and Wo Gore flown back yet? Cici, putting on a thoughtful act, pondered for a moment and said slowly, perhaps Master and the young master are stuck in traffic on their way flying back. Tuan widened her eyes, her little mouth forming an O shape. Good heavens! Is there still traffic up there? Cici tried not to laugh and continued the charade without blushing or flinching, of course. Little lady, the things in the sky aren't called cars, they're called airplanes. I suppose the master and young master are stuck in airplane traffic. She glanced down and the watch says it's almost 9, bending down to pat Tuan's little head. Miss, it's getting late, let's go to bed. Just as she was about to pick up Tuan, footsteps were heard at the door. Tuan's eyes lit up, breaking free from Cici's hand. Thump, 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 running over excitedly shouting, her. Let the king see if it's daddy or brother, two on, like. An unbridled little pony happily rushed out of the room only to bump right into Gu Qingyu, who had his hands in his pockets. There was still a purple bruise hanging on his face. Assistant Zhao followed closely beside him. Tuan scratched his head and called out. In a milky, childish voice, brother got home before daddy. Gu Qingyu snorted coldly, a sneer tugging at the corner of his mouth. With a curved smile, muttering softly, seeing it's not your dad, disappointed, aren't you? At the same moment, Cece quickly approached, glimpsing the injury on Gu Qingyu's face, her brows tightening. Young master, what happened to your face? Do you want me to? Let me help you with that. Gu Qingyu is a notorious school bully at Jingbai High School. Fights and brawls are a common occurrence for him, and he's no stranger to trips to the police station. Today, it was Assistant Zhao who brought him back, which most likely means he's gotten into trouble again. Upon hearing Cece say this, Tuan also noticed the bruises on her brother's face. Waving her little hands, she grabbed Gu Qingyu's clothes. Brother, who bullied you? Tell Tuan. And Tuan will scold them, hit them. Gu Qingyu. Upon hearing this, his body stiffened and he lowered his head to stare at the little one before him, his eyes slightly wavering. This was the first time someone had shown concern about whether he had been bullied. Instead of coldly dismissing him with a remark like, "Don't waste my time, get to the point." Pei Zhao, the special assistant, he pursed his lips, sharply tugged back the corner of his clothes, snatched the backpack from Special Assistant Zhao's hand, turned sideways, and strode upstairs. Bang, the door was slammed shut by him. Special Assistant Zhao shook his head helplessly, bent down, and rubbed Tuan's head. Little brain, little lady, staying up so late. Tuan pouted, dodging with a shake of her head. Don't touch Tuan's little brain. It's not for just anyone to touch. Assistant Zhao grinned, pinching her chubby on the cheek, threateningly saying, "Little miss, the president asked me to check if a certain little one is asleep. Children who stay up this late might get eaten by the big striped cat." Tuan's little ears perked up, her round eyes full of doubts. Uncle talks nonsense. We cats don't eat people. Assistant Zhao raised an eyebrow with an expression that said, "You don't understand, I understand perfectly," took out his phone, tapped a few times, and held it up to Tuan. On the screen was a round-headed, the cat with dark markings on its brain, narrowed its eyes, a rope tied around its neck, looking every bit like a fierce and menacing figure. Tuan gave a shudder but still stiffened its neck and stood tall, taking small steps as it moved toward Cece. After, the chubby little hand tightly grasped Cece's skirt, then hid half a step further back, only peeking out a small head, the bright, shiny big eyes firmly fixed on the cat inside the phone. If others saw the little one scared like this, they would probably. He should have stopped there, but Special Assistant Zhao got carried away, pointing at the fierce cat on the screen and deliberately lowering his voice. "Missy, do you know what this chain around the cat's neck is for?" Tuan bit her little finger, blinking curiously. "What is it?" Assistant Zhao wagged his finger, putting on a show by drawing out his words. "This is to prevent. It was the child who refuses to sleep that purposely tied it up, so it could run out at night." After saying this, they muttered, "I don't even know if it was tied tightly enough." Tuan's pupils contracted. Using both hands and feet, they zipped into Cece's embrace, as if, "I'm scared the cat will gobble me up in one bite," she sniffled, whimpering in a milky voice. "Don't eat me, I'm also a little kitty." Cece stifled a laugh, gently patting the little milk bun in her arms, and coaxed softly, "Don't be scared, we go to sleep." Assistant Zhao was in a great mood, raised an eyebrow in greeting, and left humming a tune. After Tuan finished washing up, scared and still shaken, she scurried on her short little legs to Gu Qingyu's door, lifted her chubby little hand and knocked. "Brother, open the door." No one answered, so she took a step back, pulled out a magic wand from who knows where, and swung it. Dancing and shouting, Shima opened the door. The door still showed no sign of movement. Tuan puffed out her cheeks and exhaled, then pulled her voice to shout for Shima to open the door. The door creaked, opening a crack ajar. Tuan's eyes lit up and she abandoned her magic. With a thump, it darted into the room, headed straight for Gu Qingyu's big bed, pounced and rolled into a ball, its little body bouncing in wave-like motions from the springy surface, crying out awe and playful delight. Gu Qingyu wordlessly closed the door, frowned, and walked to the bed. "Hey," staring at the little dumpling rolling all over the bed, he asked coldly, "What are you doing? I'll count to 3, get off my bed right now, and..." Roll back to your room. As he spoke, he put on a stern face. 2, 3. Tuan flopped and crawled to the edge of the bed, imitating his brother. With her appearance, chin raised, hands on hips, brother is done counting. Gu Qingyu's temple twitched, his face filled with impatience. Not sleeping late at night. Do you want to go to heaven? Gu Tuan. I'll give you a chance to leave on your own, otherwise let me. Please leave, or you won't be walking out. Tuan pouted, pulled out a small bottle of ointment and a pink piggy band-aid from her little pocket and held out her little hand in front of Gu Qingyu. Gu Qingyu was stunned. He looked at the kid in front of him, then lowered his head to glance at the ointment and band-aid lying quietly in the tiny palm. His nose stung with emotion, which only made him more uneasy instead. The boy turned his face away, his voice sounding. Some of them stammered vaguely, seemingly embarrassed. Who needs these? I'm not injured. Tuan clicked her tongue disdainfully. I'm not an idiot. Guoguo's face was already flushing red. Gu Qingyu was speechless. He had always thought this kid was dumb. He snatched the ointment and band-aids from the kid's hands and slathered them on his own face. Thus, the school bully of Jingbai now had a pink Peppa Pig plastered on his right cheek. Fresh out of the oven, Gu Qingyu looked at himself in the mirror. Although he detested the color pink, well, it was something. That little chubby kid had gone through a lot of trouble to send over. So he'd reluctantly put it on. The youth walked over to. At the bedside, in high spirits, he picks up the little dumpling on the bed. All right then. Seeing as you're so filial, I won't kick you out. I'll carry you back to the bedroom, little sir. The silly little cat blinks its eyes. What am I to do with you? Bend to stretch. No. I want to find brother to sleep. Gu Qingyu's face darkened as he shook the little brat in his hand. Little brat, you're dreaming. Why don't you go out and inquire about what kind of status this little lord has? Dream on, the little silly cat pouts, eyes sparkling as it snuggles against its own dear older brother. 5 minutes later, because it no longer had to worry about being eaten by the big tabby, the little furball once again excitedly rolled over to Gu King. In Yu's embrace, the young man sighed and skillfully pulled the kid up a bit. Stop rolling around. Hurry up and sleep. If you don't have to go to school, this young master still has to attend class tomorrow. Hearing this, Tuan finally obediently stopped moving. Tilting her head to the side, she reached out and poked her silly brother, using her little milky voice to softly call, brother, are you asleep? I am asleep, Gu Qingyu lazily responded while lying on his side. The silly little cat blinked and blinked. Bah, the words were full of certainty. Guoguo didn't sleep at all. You're fooling a kid, Gu Qingyu. Where did I fool you? Tuan snorted. I know, people who are asleep don't talk at all. Gu Qingyu turned around, ruffled the little kid's head. That's because you've seen too little. Tuan nodded in a daze, then stealthily edged a bit closer to his own brother. So are there kitties that eat people too? Gu Qingyu seemed to have thought of something, his voice deepening. Can't really say for sure. He fell silent for a moment, then reached out and forcibly closed Tuan's eyes, commanding, go to sleep now. If you don't sleep, just you wait, I'm telling you. Tell your dad. When the little silly cat heard this, he was instantly stunned. Recently, his dumb daddy had for some reason been keeping an especially tight leash on him. If he found out he wasn't sleeping, wouldn't he have to punish him by taking away another episode of Pleasant Goat? Gu Tuan angrily stuck out her tongue in her own brother just as she was about to go sleepy. But seeing the injuries on Gu Qingyu's face, Tuan couldn't help but ask again, Jeech, you still haven't told me who bullied you. Gu Qingyu didn't speak. He decided to shut up. Otherwise, if he kept chatting with this idiot, he'd be talking until the year of the monkey and the month of the horse. Not getting a response, the little dumpling was so mad again. This time he turned right around in anger. Go, bad egg brother actually didn't want to chat with him this much. Little Tuanzi also decided to ignore him. Both siblings lay quietly on the bed thinking about their own things. Suddenly, Gu Qingyu only felt something stick to his face. Something soft and tender. Having figured it out, little Tuan gave Gu Qingyu a smacking kiss. A helpless little milky voice tinged with a hint of doting. Oh, well, who told you're my big brother? From now on, Tuan, the king will protect you. Good night, bro. After saying this, he turned around, muttering under his breath that the king's title was truly domineering. Damn it, I also want to be the king. The young boy behind him stirred slightly. He half raised his eyes, looking at the small figure before him, his expression unclear in his gaze. Silly melon. After a long moment, he silently moved his lips. Still, I'll protect you. In the blink of an eye, the next day arrived, and the Gu family manor was in an uproar. Heaven, the young miss is missing. The butler was practically worried to death, immediately ordering everyone to search, while he himself went to the surveillance room 5 minutes later. When the butler saw for the third time on the surveillance footage, the little brat holding Gu Qingyu. After getting into the car with his school bag, he fell silent. If nothing unexpected happened, the young miss should have gone to Jingbai High School with the young master. Meanwhile, after traveling all the way, the car finally stopped at the entrance of Jingbai High School. He got off. Gu Qingyu opened the car door and picked up his backpack. The moment he slung it on, the young man looked strange as he weighed the bag in his hands. Why did he feel this backpack was a bit heavier than yesterday when he carried it back? After walking just a few steps, Gu Qingyu felt his backpack growing heavier and heavier, and it even seemed a bit uncomfortable. Just as he was about to check, he noticed that everyone around seemed to be staring at him, especially the girls. The young man frowned, a cold glance sweeping across his originally flawless, exquisite handsome face suddenly darkened like storm clouds. Everyone was startled by this expression. After all, Gu Qingyu was famously the school bully and also from the Gu family. Young master, they naturally dared not provoke him, and all lowered their heads, no longer looking at him. Gu Qingyu snorted coldly. Just as I was planning to turn round and give those people behind me another fierce glare, I turned my head to the side and saw a small, white, tender, fleshy little hand waving on my back. His face changed color, and a sense of foreboding stirred in his heart. I have a bad feeling I didn't seem to see that little brat this morning.